Peppa Pig. Peppa plays rugby, and if you'd like to buy this book, check in the link description down below. Peppa, George, and Daddy Pig are visiting the rabbit family. Daddy Pig and Daddy Rabbit are watching a rugby match on television.
Come on, white team,
shouts Daddy Pig.
Come on, red team,
cries Daddy Rabbit. It's a bit loud in here, Rebecca Rabbit tells Peppa. Let's go and play somewhere else. Peppa, George, Rebecca and Richard Rabbit leave the living room. Our daddies are being very noisy today, says Peppa. Suddenly the children hear more loud sounds. Oh no, gasped Rebecca Rabbit. Now the babies are awake. The noise from the rugby match woke them up, says Mummy Rabbit, holding Rosie and Robbie Rabbit. Do you like watching rugby too? Asks Peppa. I like playing rugby, says Mummy Rabbit. My sister and I are quite good. Can you show us how to play, please? Asks Peppa. What a great idea, says Mummy Rabbit. Mummy Rabbit phones her sister. Hello, Miss Rabbit. She comes straight over. Hello, says Miss Rabbit. You all look like you're ready to play rugby. Yes, shout Peppa, George, Rebecca and Richard. Let's start by passing the ball, says Mummy Rabbit. Mummy Rabbit passes the ball to Mrs. Rabbit. Miss Rabbit passes it to Richard. Oh, cries Richard as the ball falls to the ground and bounces back up into the air. This ball is a funny shape, says Peppa. It makes it hard to catch. Don't worry, says Miss Rabbit. You can kick it instead. George gives the ball a kick. Then Rebecca grabs it and starts running. Keep going, says Mummy Rabbit. You can get a try. A try is like a goal, explains Miss Rabbit. The daddies come out of their burrow.
The match on the television has finished,
says Daddy Pig.
Now we can cheer you on.
Everybody has lots of fun throwing and kicking the ball. After a little while it starts to rain. Oh no, cries Peppa. Do we have to go inside? No, says Mummy Rabbit smiling. Rugby is even more fun when it's wet outside. Mummy Rabbit passes the ball to Miss Rabbit. Miss Rabbit catches it and slides through a muddy puddle. Come on, she calls. Everyone join in. The children have lots of fun in all the rain and mud.
What a great match,
cheers Daddy Pig.
Hooray for the rugby players.
Peppa loves rugby. Everyone loves rugby. The end. Peppa Pig. Let's go shopping, Peppa. And if you'd like to buy this book, check in the link description down below. Once upon a time, Peppa and George were having their breakfast. What are we doing today, Daddy? Asked Peppa.
We need to go shopping, replied Daddy Pig, rubbing his tummy for lunch.
Yippee! Cheered Peppa and George. They loved going shopping. When breakfast was finished, everyone jumped into the car. We're here! Cheered Peppa when they arrived at the supermarket. Peppa and George leaped out of the car and started jumping up and down excitedly. They loved the supermarket. First, we need a trolley, said Peppa. Daddy Pig put George in the trolley, said George happily. Daddy, said Peppa, can I sit in the trolley too?
Ho ho,
laughed Daddy Pig.
You're too big, Peppa, but you can help me with the shopping.
Oh, goody, said Peppa, skipping into the supermarket. There was so much to see inside. Can we get one of everything? Asked Peppa. No, Peppa, that would be far too much, replied Mummy Pig. But how do we know what to get? Asked Peppa.
We use this,
said Daddy Pig, holding up a piece of paper. Ooh, said Peppa. What is that? It's our shopping list, explained Mummy Pig. We have 4 things on our list. Daddy Pig looked at the list closely and read it out slowly. 4 tomatoes, spaghetti, 4 onions, fruit. I'll find it all, said Peppa. I can see the tomatoes, cried Peppa. Peppa counted 4 tomatoes as Mummy Pig put them into a bag. 1, 2, 3, 4. She skipped off to put them in the trolley. Daddy Pig crossed them off the list. What's next on the list? Asked Mummy Pig. Can you remember? Spaghetti, chid Peppa. Spaghetti, chid George. Spaghetti was Peppa and George's favourite. I can see it, cried Peppa. Follow me. Peppa found the spaghetti and put it into the trolley. Well done, Peppa, said Mummy Pig. Peppa and George couldn't remember what was next on the list. Dinosaur? Guessed George. George, said Peppa, there aren't any dinosaurs in the supermarket. Daddy Pig laughed. Onions are next. Onions, cried Peppa. I remember. She raced off and counted 4 onions into a bag. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then she put them into the trolley. Well done, Peppa, said Daddy Pig, crossing them off the list. The last thing on the list was fruit. I'll get it, cried Peppa. It's George's turn now, said Mummy Pig. Replied George. How about bananas, suggested Peppa. Or apples or pears? Or oranges? George shook his head. He didn't want any of Peppa's suggestions. He wanted a very big watermelon. George was very happy with his choice, even though it was bigger than him. Daddy Pig passed George the watermelon. It was very heavy. George dropped the watermelon in the trolley. It was so big the whole trolley shook. Everyone laughed. Well done, George. Daddy Pig crossed fruit off the shopping list. That's everything, said Mummy Pig. Let's head to the checkout and pay. At the checkout, Peppa and Daddy Pig put the food on the conveyor belt. Miss Rabbit scanned each thing. Tomatoes, onions, watermelon, spaghetti, great big chocolate cake. Chocolate cake? Said Mummy Pig, Peppa and George. That wasn't on the list. Peppa, did you put a chocolate cake in the trolley? Asked Mummy Pig. No, Mummy, replied Peppa. George, did you put a chocolate cake in the trolley? Asked Mummy Pig. No, replied George. Well, I didn't put it in the trolley, said Mummy Pig. Then who did? Asked Peppa. Said Daddy Pig, holding up the chocolate cake. Guilty. I thought it might be nice for pudding. Daddy Pig, said Mummy Pig. Sorry, said Daddy Pig, turning red. It just looks so delicious. It does look rather yummy, said Mummy Pig. Let's pretend it was on the list. Hooray! Everyone cheered. When Peppa and her family arrived home, it was time for lunch. They had a delicious spaghetti, followed by a big piece of watermelon and a great big slice of chocolate cake. Peppa, George, Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig loved going shopping for food, but they loved eating it most of all. The end. Peppa Pig, Peppa and her Golden Boots. And if you'd like to buy this book, check the link description down below. It was the day of the big puddle jumping competition. Peppa and her friends were practicing jumping up and down the muddy puddles. My daddy always wins, boasted Peppa. He says the first rule of puddle jumping is to wear your boots. And mine are very special because they're made out of gold. They're not gold, replied Susie Sheep. They're yellow. They are not yellow. They are real plastic gold, protested Peppa. Would anyone like some orange juice? Called Mummy Pig from the house. Yes, please, replied everyone. They ran inside, leaving the boots outside the front door. When Peppa and her friends had finished their juice, they headed outside to put on their boots. Oh no! My boots have gone! Sobbed Peppa. Mr. Zebra arrived with the post. I've just seen a dog with boots on, he said. Peppa sniffed. Were they gold? No, yellow, he replied. Mr. Duck came running down the hill wearing Peppa's golden boots. Peppa ran after her. Mrs. Duck, can I have my boots back, please? But Mrs. Duck did not want to give Peppa's boots back. She didn't stop running until she reached Captain Dog's boat. No one could stop Mrs. Duck. She leapt into the water and swam away. Captain Dog started his engine. I think my boat can go faster than that, Duck, he exclaimed. But Captain Dog's boat could not keep up with Mrs. Duck. That's a fast duck, he said. Mrs. Duck finally stopped at a little island where Grampy Rabbit had been shipwrecked when his boat capsized. Mrs. Duck has my boots and she won't give them back, Peppa called. Don't worry, Peppa, replied Grampy Rabbit. Mrs. Duck has nowhere to go. But then Mrs. Duck started flying and she was still wearing the boots. Oh no, cried Peppa. Mrs. Duck is flying to the moon with my boots. Don't worry, Peppa, says Grampy Rabbit, pointing to the neighbouring island. We'll take my rocket. I don't really think Peppa's boots will be on the moon, said Mummy Pig. Nonsense, insisted Grampy Rabbit, helping everyone onto the rocket. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off! On the moon, Peppa and her friends searched everywhere for Mrs. Duck and the golden boots. Let's ask at the shop, suggested Susie Sheep. You don't get shops on the moon, exclaimed Daddy Pig. Postcards, called Miss Rabbit from inside her gift shop. Ice cream buckets and spades. Meanwhile, Grandpa Pig had spotted Mrs. Duck in his garden. Those aren't your boots, are they? He asked. He quickly dialed Daddy Pig's number. Hello, Grandpa Pig, said Daddy Pig. Yes, Peppa has lost some boots. We'll be right there. Next up, Grandpa Pig's garden, announced Grampy Rabbit. Peppa bounced excitedly out of her rocket. My boots! My golden boots! She exclaimed. Thank you, Grandpa. Grandpa Pig helped Peppa put them on. Now we can go to the puddle jumping competition, said Mummy Pig. Oh, yes, agreed Daddy Pig. We'd better hurry. The big puddle jumping competition was about to begin. First up, Daddy Pig, cried Mr. Potato. Daddy Pig took a giant leap, and it made a very big splash. Then it was Mr. Elephant's turn, and Mr. Elephant made an even bigger splash. Mr. Elephant is the winner, announced Mr. Potato. Peppa cleared her throat. Please, can I have a go too? She asked. Oh, of course, replied Mr. Potato. And can all my friends help? Peppa added. Mr. Elephant was not pleased. Hang on, I don't think that's really... It sounds perfectly fair to me, interrupted Daddy Pig. Peppa and her friends formed a circle and held hands. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, they all chanted. Jump!
Peppa and her friends made the biggest splash ever. Peppa and her friends are the winners, declared Mr. Potato. I still think, began Mr. Elephant.
Hooray! Cheered everyone loudly.
Peppa loved her golden boots. Everyone loved their boots. And everyone loved the big puzzle jumping competition. The end. Peppa Pig. Good night, Peppa. And if you'd like to buy this book, check in the link description down below. Once upon a time, Granny and Grandpa Pig came round for dinner. It was almost time for Peppa and George to go to bed. Oh! yawned Daddy Pig, very loudly while they were eating. Everyone giggled.
Ho ho, sorry,
snorted Daddy Pig. I'm a little tired. Peppa and George weren't tired at all. Can we please jump in puddles for a tiny bit? Asked Peppa. Please.
Okay,
said Daddy Pig.
But you must come in at bath time.
Peppa and George loved jumping in muddy puddles. They jumped up and down until they were covered in mud.
Peppa, George,
called Daddy Pig.
You must be feeling sleepy after all that jumping. Let's get you in the bath.
But Daddy, we're not even a little bit sleepy, replied Peppa. Peppa and George splashed in the bath until they were both nice and clean.
I think bath time is over,
said Daddy Pig, dripping wet.
You must be tired after all that splashing.
We're not even a little bit tired, cried Peppa, splashing Daddy Pig again. Laughed George. Daddy Pig was soaked. Peppa and George hopped out of the bath. They dried off and put their pyjamas on very slowly. Then brushed their teeth for an extra long time. Quick, wash your faces. Granny Pig wants to tuck you into bed, said Mummy Pig. Yippee! cheered Peppa. Gangy egg, cheered George. Peppa and George were finally ready for bed. They said goodnight to Mummy and Daddy Pig and found Granny Pig in their room. Come on, little ones, said Granny Pig. It's bedtime, hop in. I can't go to bed without Teddy, said Peppa. Dinosaur, sobbed George. So Granny Pig found Teddy and Mr. Dinosaur and tucked everyone in. Good night, Peppa and Teddy, said Granny Pig. Good night, George and Mr. Dinosaur. But we're not even a tiniest bit sleepy, Granny, said Peppa. I see, said Granny Pig. I wonder what will make you sleepy. Can you tell us a bedtime story? asked Peppa. Of course, Peppa, replied Granny Pig. As long as you promise to go to sleep as soon as the story ends. We promise, cried Peppa. Peppa and George loved bedtime stories. Granny Pig began telling a story. Once upon a time there was a beautiful princess called Peppa, interrupted Peppa. Yes, said Granny Pig. And Sir George the brave knight. Peppa interrupted again. Giggled George. Granny Pig hurried on. Princess Peppa and Sir George lived in a castle. A great big castle in the sky, said Peppa. Granny Pig tried to finish the story. Princess Peppa and Sir George had been playing all day in the castle and were very tired. Then the king arrived, said Peppa, and a cook and a wizard and a scary dragon dinosaur. Dinosaur, added George. Grrr. And the cook made them all a gigantic picnic with sandwiches, cakes, jelly. Peppa listed all the foods she could think of. Grandpa Pig came to find Granny Pig. I'm telling Peppa and George a bedtime story, explained Granny Pig, and we promise to go to sleep when the story ends, added Peppa.
I see, said Grandpa Pig. Granny Pig, why don't you leave this to me? I'm good at ending stories.
So Granny Pig said good night and went downstairs.
Grandpa Pig did his best to end the story. After they ate the lovely picnic, everyone fell asleep. The end.
But Peppa did not want the story to end. Then they all woke up and their friends arrived, she cried. And they went for a ride in Princess Peppa's carriage and decided to have a great big party. Soon Daddy Pig came upstairs.
I'm the expert at telling bedtime stories,
he said. Then he whispered quietly to Grandpa Pig, I'll have them asleep in no time. So Grandpa Pig said good night and went downstairs. Princess Peppa and Sir George were just about to have a great big party, Peppa told Daddy Pig.
I see, he replied.
Mummy Pig hid banging, so she came upstairs too. Peppa, George and Daddy Pig were dancing. We're having a party like in the story, explained Peppa.
They're almost asleep,
said Daddy Pig. Thank you, Daddy, said Mummy Pig. I'll take over now. So Daddy Pig said goodnight and went downstairs. Mummy Pig tucked Peppa and George back into bed. Then she asked Peppa to tell the whole bedtime story from the beginning very quietly. Once upon a time, whispered Peppa, yawning, there was a beautiful princess called Peppa. She lived with Sir George and a brave knights in a great big castle in the sky. Speaking softly was making Peppa really sleepy. Peppa tried to finish the story, but she just couldn't keep her eyes open. Soon George fell fast asleep and so did Peppa. Mummy Pig looked at the two little ones, smiled and whispered, Good night, George, good night, Peppa. Then she headed downstairs to find Granny, Grandpa and Daddy Pig. They were all fast asleep. It was bedtime for Peppa and George, and it was bedtime for everyone else too. Good night, said Mummy Pig. The end. Peppa Pig. Peppa goes around the world. And if you'd like to buy this book, check in the link description down below. It was almost the start of the summer holidays. Peppa was playing in the garden with her friends. What are you doing over the holidays? Asks Wendy Wolf. I'm going to the park, replied Peppa. Peppa was very excited. She was going to spend the holidays jumping in lots of muddy puddles. Peppa's friends were going on holiday all around the world. I'm going to the jungle, said Pedro Pony. We're going to the desert, said Emily and Edmund Elephant. And I'm going to the mountains, barked Danny Dog. What about you, Susie? asked Peppa. I'm going to the South Pole to play with the penguins, Susie Sheep grinned. On the first day of the holiday, Peppa and George climbed into the car. Time to go to the park, said Mummy Pig.
Let's go,
cheered Daddy Pig. The little car bounced along the road. The engine went.
Oh dear,
groaned Daddy Pig.
the car has broken down.
Mummy Pig called for help. Please come quick, she said. This is an emergency. Look, gasped Peppa. Here comes Miss Rabbit's emergency breakdown service. That was quick, said Mummy Pig. Miss Rabbit said it would take her all day to put things right. But we wanted to go to the park, cried Peppa. Don't worry, replied Miss Rabbit. While I fix your car, you can borrow my aeroplane. Aeroplane! George shouted. Everyone climbed into Miss Rabbit's aeroplane. Mummy Pig to the controls. This is fun, she said.
Are we supposed to be flying upside down?
Wondered Daddy Pig. The ground is in the sky and the sky is on the ground, giggled Peppa. It didn't take long for Mummy Pig to get the hang of the aeroplane flying.
Next stop, the park,
said Daddy Pig. To jump in muddy puddles, cried Peppa. Daddy Pig opened out his map. Are we lost as usual? Asked Peppa.
We are not lost,
snorted Daddy Pig.
I can see some trees. That must be the park.
Where are the swings and roundabouts? Asked Peppa. Said Daddy Pig.
This looks more like a jungle than a park.
Peppa gasped. Pedro was on holiday in the jungle. Mummy Pig pulled the handbrake and the plane fell through the trees, landing on the ground with a bump. Here was Pedro. Hello, Pedro, called Peppa. Are you having a nice holiday? Pedro nodded. It's brilliant. There are parrots, monkeys and everything. The jungle was fun, but there was no muddy puddles to jump in. Can we visit my other friends on the holidays around the world? Asked Peppa. I don't see why not, said Mummy Pig. It was Daddy Pig's turn to fly the aeroplane. Where next? He said. The mountains, said Peppa. That's where Danny Dog is. Danny Dog was enjoying his mountain holiday.
The best bit about climbing a mountain is that you're all alone,
explained Captain Dog.
There's no one else around.
Daddy Pig landed on the aeroplane on the top of the mountain, right in front of Danny and Captain Dog. Hello, Danny, shouted Peppa. We're flying around the world to see my friends. This mountain is very high. Peppa and the family said goodbye to Danny and Captain Dog and flew away again. Soon, Daddy Pig spotted lots of yellow sand in the distance.
It must be the desert, he said.
That's where Emily and Edmund are on holiday, cried Peppa. It wasn't easy to land an aeroplane in the desert. We've sunken into the ground, said Mummy Pig.
Why do they have to fill the desert with so much sand?
Cried Daddy Pig. Hello, Emily, shouted Peppa. Hello, Edmund. We've been studying a were-lizard, whispered Edmund. But it must be shy because it's run away. It has scaly back and a long red tongue, added Emily. Yuck, said Mummy Pig. Luckily it ran off then. The lizard suddenly appeared on a rock.
There it is,
shouted Daddy Pig, frightening it away. Did you see it had other people to visit? Sighed Dr. Elephant. Yes, said Peppa. We've still got to go and see Susie at the South Pole. Goodbye, everybody. Susie was having a great holiday, but she did miss Peppa. I wish Peppa was here, Susie sighed. Peppa's aeroplane landed on snow and ice. Peppa! Cried Susie. Susie! Cried Peppa. Peppa and Susie were best friends. They were very pleased to see each other again. Peppa had lots of fun with Susie and the penguins, but they could play all day. Peppa still had to go to the park. Miss Rabbit should have fixed our car by now, said Mummy Pig. The aeroplane flew all the way back around the world. Hello, Miss Rabbit, said Peppa. We've flown all around the world.
Good thing I remembered to fill up the aeroplane's tank up with petrol this morning, said Miss Rabbit.
Your little car is working again, said Miss Rabbit. Peppa and George climbed inside. Flying around the world was nice, decided Peppa, but something was missing. A muddy puddle. Peppa and George loved jumping up and down in muddy puddles. Everyone loves jumping up and down in muddy puddles. The end. Peppa Pig, George's New Dinosaur. And if you'd like to buy this book, check in the link description down below. George's favourite toy is Mr. Dinosaur. George likes bouncing Mr. Dinosaur in the garden, playing with him at bath time, and he loves going to sleep with Mr. Dinosaur beside him. At bedtime, Peppa says, George, I think your dinosaur's broken. George is very upset. Mummy and Daddy Pig come in to see why George is crying. Cries George.
Poor George,
says Daddy Pig.
Maybe it's time you got a new dinosaur.
The next day, Peppa, George, Mummy and Daddy Pig visit Mr. Fox's shop. I'm sure we'll find a lovely dinosaur here, George, says Mummy Pig.
Look, George,
says Daddy Pig, pointing to the shop window.
There's a big one.
Ooh, Dinosaur, says George.
Good morning, beams Mr. Fox. Can I help you? We'd like to buy the dinosaur in the window, please, says Daddy Pig. Good choice, says Mr. Fox. This is Dino-Roar. He walks, he talks, and he sings. Wow, says everyone.
Dino-Roar,
says George excitedly. We'll take it, says Daddy Pig. George is playing with Dino-Roar in the garden. Dino-Roar sings, Dino-Roar, Dino-Roar, listen to Dino-Roar, roar. Careful, George, says Daddy Pig. Don't play too roughly because Dino-Roar will get broken. George wants to play with Dino-Roar in the bath.
Dino-Roar,
says George. But Mummy Pig says, George, if you get Dino-Roar wet, he'll stop working. Peppa and George are asleep in bed, but suddenly Dino-Roar comes to life. Roar, Dino-Roar, Dino-Roar. George, says Peppa, Dino-Roar has woken me up. Maybe Dino-Roar should sleep somewhere else, says Daddy Pig, taking Dino-Roar away. George is feeling sad. He cannot play with Dino-Roar in the garden, or in the bath, or even in his bed. Never mind, George, says Mummy Pig brightly. Dino-Roar can still roar. Dino-Roar, listen to Dino-Roar. Dino-Roar stops walking and talking completely. I think the batteries must have run out, says Mummy Pig. Already? How many are there? Grumbles Daddy Pig as batteries pour out of Dino-Roar. Hundreds and thousands, cries Peppa as she picks him up. Peppa spots something green under a bush. What's this? Says Peppa. Is it a trumpet? You found Mr. Dinosaur's tail, says Mummy Pig. Now Daddy can mend him. He might be a bit difficult to mend, says Daddy Pig doubtfully. But the tail slips perfectly into place. Daddy Pig has mended Mr. Dinosaur. Ho ho, chuckles Daddy Pig. Hello, Mr. Dinosaur, says Peppa. Grrr, replies George. Everybody laughs. Mr. Dinosaur is George's favourite toy in the whole world. The end.